welcome everyone to the Thursday evening class, and I believe there are only experienced meditators amongst us tonight, so I think we will segue straight into our meditation for today. So we'll sit for about 45 minutes, and the theme of today's meditation will be the peace energy that paves the way to transcendental progress. So if you'd like to make yourself comfortable for some meditation now. So we'd like to settle yourself now for some meditation, and make sure you're comfortable enough to be able to sit for a long, long time without having to move around too much. Close your eyes very gently, as softly as you can. And as usual, we can take a few good deep breaths to ourselves, slowly and smoothly. We breathe intentionally deep, with the intention to relax the mind as well as the body. And we breathe not only for relaxation, but also to bring the awareness gently back to our body, allowing our breath to become softer as we relax. So we adopt a comfortable position for ourselves, but still with our back fairly straight and our neck upright. Sometimes we assume our body is relaxed, but when we come to check, we find there are still places where tension seems to linger on. So we take a few moments to examine every single part of our body, to make sure there's no remaining tension that's going to encroach on our little bubble of relaxation. We relax our shoulders. From there we continue by relaxing our arms, down to our hands and our fingers. We relax our torso and legs, all the way down to our feet and our toes. And we'll find that if we can manage to get the body to loosen up, then our mind will loosen up as well. But as we turn to the relaxation of the mind, we have to accept that there are many signs that we need meditation. And most of them are to do with calming the mind. It may be because you're anxious about the past, or because you worry about the future. You may feel guilty when you're not busy, or you may still be trying to multitask in spite of all the mistakes you're making. You might be worried about good experiences coming to an end. Or you might simply want to live life more mindfully. But whatever your motivation is for practicing meditation, from here on in, we are going to let go of anything still on our mind, no matter how noble the intention. So we let go of absolutely everything we can, imagining our mind is slowing down, becoming softer, even if it is not yet quite still. And with awareness within the body, putting aside any worries or concerns in the mind, while conjuring up a sense of happiness and joy to set the scene for the meditation ahead. And at this point we can imagine that inside our body is just an empty space. And within the space of the body, in our mind's eye, we might conjure up a picture of the sun shining. In order to come to our center, we just reach with our awareness, nuzzling and nestling up against the feeling inside the body center. So we allow our awareness to gravitate down towards the abdomen, not rushing, but just reaching with the awareness toward the center of the body, which is like a point of reference or an anchor for the mind, that from now on will help to prevent the mind from wandering as much. So the imagined sun at our center might be shining bright like a spotlight or a bright sphere, or it might be vaguer than that. At first, the imaginary sun might be more of a feeling of bright light. We may feel the bright ball of light rather than seeing it. But whatever form the object takes, we stay with it, graciously accepting any form it may take. And in the meantime, our awareness continues to nuzzle and nestle up against the center of the sun. And in practice, we observe the object as if we were inside the object rather than looking down from on top of it. We accept it as it is, while bearing in mind the success factors that tell us how best to observe. Sometimes known for short as the 4 C's: concentration and comfort in balance, consistency, and checking afterwards to confirm we are on the right track. We remain with this bright inner light that we have uncritically. For now we can suspend judgment, allowing the awareness to remain unperturbed at our center. The longer the mind has an unbroken connection with the center, the more we can connect with a profound state of peace. If our mind slips outside the bright center, then that sense of peace will diminish. But in the meantime, we keep bringing our awareness back whenever it is distracted, allowing the mind to merge closer and closer with that inner illumination. If the mind wanders, we check in again with where the mind is. Bring it back again to the center or to the middle of the bright light if necessary. And in the meantime, we keep the mind neutral and free of questions or commentary. If any new experience arises, we notice it and no more. We just accept the experience as it is. We maintain an observant mind that just accepts what the experience is, without any need to find an explanation for everything. We just observe and accept. And if we have thoughts arising in the mind, we do our best to ignore them, or at least not to elaborate on them. Unless you're one of those people who has so many thoughts that it's impossible to avoid getting entangled in them, in which case you may need to make use of the traditional mantra, hearing the sound of the words Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, repeated over and over in the mind, so the actual source of the words is down there also at the center of the body, along with the inner object. Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, lightly, gently, and continuously, and with a special lightness of touch, maintaining our inner object, whether it's something we see or something we feel, or is at the center of whatever is there. Even if it's darkness, we can be at the center of it. But the important thing is the lightness of touch. So in this way we continue to maintain our attention on track at the center of the body, each to our own practice for a few more moments now in silence, until we come to the appropriate time. stillness at the center of the body. And as our mind settles more and more, we start to notice a lighter feeling inside us. Feeling light is an indicator that a special sort of energy in the mind is continuing to accumulate more and more. And this peaceful energy, unlike solid matter, has no weight at all. And the more of such energy we can manage to accumulate in the mind, the more transparent and weightless our bodies will start to feel. So as we meditate more, little by little, even without intending it, we begin to feel as if we're becoming lighter, as if that energy lightens up our being, leaving us with a sense of transparency that extends throughout our body, connecting even beyond the limits of our body and expanding outwards. But in spite of the novelty of the experience, we continue to maintain our mind free of any questions or commentary. We don't encourage a skittish mind, because the mind that jumps from one thing to another will be unable to connect fully with that peaceful energy. But instead we remain at the soft nucleus of that inner experience as we continue our meditation for a few more moments in silence. positive feeling inside the mind as it gradually slows down to touch the center space. As time goes on, it will become increasingly natural for the mind to remain motionless at the center, immersed in the peace energy that is found there. As the mind slows down, it will become easier for us to get in touch with that peace energy. And each time our awareness touches gently at the center, it's as if that peace energy will start to flow, pervading us with a tide of clarity and peace that continues to feed into our meditation. Of course, these subtle changes in the mind are not yet awakening or enlightenment, but yet the way the peace energy is gradually accumulated will pave the way for us towards transcendental attainment. Without such energy, it's very hard for us to go any deeper or further in our meditation. That's why we need to remain present in the moment, allowing ourselves to be filled to the brim with this peace energy. And in the meantime, we bide our time as the mind gradually fills up, a process that may require our patience. In the meantime, we rest the mind emotionlessly in order to connect with that stream of inner energy. Of course, we know that this special energy in the mind has several transformative effects. The way it cleanses the mind of the impurities, the way it raises the quality of the mind, the way it attracts happiness, the way it stabilizes the mind while making the mind more flexible and radiant, the way it increases the potential of the mind, allowing us to take better decisions, the way it allows us to have more insightful analysis and helps our thinking to become more thorough and comprehensive. But for all of these benefits, we need to allow the peace energy to kick in first of all. If we try to get ahead of ourselves when we don't have enough of that peace energy, then we won't get too far. So we remain at the center for a moment, absorbing the peace energy with the mind at a standstill. Before long, that sense of lightness will gradually arise within us. There are some people who might dismiss that peace energy as a sort of mental distraction. But at the beginning stages of our meditation, it's something that should never be underestimated. Whether it be the groundwork of finding the center within ourselves, balancing body and mind, realizing the limitations of our physical existence, sparking joy in life, or sharing that joy with others. All of these stages of the practice, apart from being a pleasure in and of themselves, are also paving the way through the accumulation of peace energy towards the higher transcendental attainments. So without losing or abandoning that sense of comfort and well-being that we've already built up for ourselves in meditation, we continue to maintain our peace energy as continuously as we can, for as long as we can. It's one of the many paradoxes that surrounds the art of meditation, like the gateless gate or non-duality, or Zen koans like that of the one hand clapping. And no less confusing is the concept of benefiting from peace energy without it being something that we can own. It's also a paradox to gain benefit when the benefit is no longer personal or egotistical. Because from its roots in the feel-good peace energy, the meditation will start to leave a permanent transformation in the way you see the world. And even as that peace energy keeps on running through the mind, it allows us to see through the delusions, especially concerning those of our self or our ego, giving us a greater potential to be in the present and leaving us with more inspiration to do the greater things in our lives. The more peace energy that we have built up for ourselves, the greater will be the scope that we have for compassion, love, creativity, lightness, harmony and joy, rather than being stuck in a web of delusion. So with peace energy in our meditation, that we gradually accumulate more and more, the greater, more subtle qualities of mind will become more accessible to us. So fully realizing now how this peace energy can pave the way towards higher attainments in our meditation, we continue to focus our mind lightly and gently in this way, just for a few more moments now in silence, until we come to the appropriate time. Sapi Buddha Palapata Pacchekanan Balang Arahantananchate Chena Harakam Bandami Sapaso Sabaputanupavena Sapadhammanupavena Sapasankhanupavena Satasoti Bhavanto Te. So if you'd like to come at the end of your meditation for this evening, you can gradually open your eyes again. If you feel at all uncomfortable, then you can slowly try changing to a more comfortable position before gradually finishing your practice. So far so good, everyone? Not getting too rusty in your meditation? Well, tonight's topic is generally not one of the audience favorites, but as I'm doing a sort of series of talks which lead gradually from the more mundane to the more transcendental, somewhere along the line, one has to mention Intoxicants. And the previous blessing in the sequence, number 19, talked about temptations generally, and temptations there were the sort which you can probably picture quite easily, and then the more subtle ones which reside in the mind, some of which are like hindrances in meditation, some of which are more subtle than that still. But I did mention last time that most of the temptations I talked about are still quite easy adversaries when compared to the sort of temptations that also have a physical dependency involved with them. So just to say no to something that is tempting your mind is pretty easy compared with something that your body also has a craving for. And this is why probably intoxicants have been given their own special blessing completely, because the sort of strategies and determination you need to overcome them is maybe of a different sort of magnitude. And going back 20 odd years when I was a young monk, sent freshly to convert the heathens in Belgium at the time, the policy of the temple was just teach people meditation. You don't need to go into Buddhist culture and other connected things like that. Just teach them meditation and they will know for themselves what to do. So I followed the policy at the time, and we had some very strange sort of meditation experiences coming back from the audiences there. And they were telling me things like, well, I can see a crystal ball inside, but it's spinning the whole of the time. Like I can't keep it still at all. I thought, this is really strange. I've been in Thailand for years and never heard these sorts of experiences from meditation. So once I got to know this sort of particular sector of the audience better, it turns out that every evening after the meditation class, they all went to the pub together. And they got fairly sort of out of it. So it wasn't a great surprise that like mixing two things together ended up with some pretty strange and unstable, you might say, meditation experiences. So these days, at least down on level 20 of the blessings, then one has to come across some of the Western values concerning alcohol and intoxicants generally, which sometimes are a little bit out of step with the values which generally are associated with a meditating culture. So, contrary to the general logic of the West, which is generally quite permissive towards alcohol consumption, because it's associated with relaxation and celebration, most Westerners would generally balk at any suggestion that alcohol is destructive. However, the statistics, and I got the UK ones for you especially, tell a different story. And maybe because of the lockdown, but the number of deaths caused annually in the UK is up to 9,000 a year, where alcohol consumption has contributed to the cause of death. Alcohol misuse is the biggest risk factor for death, ill health, disability amongst 15 to 49-year-olds in the UK, and 39% of violent crime is linked with the influence of alcohol in England, and in Scotland it is worse. Furthermore, there's an estimated 30% of UK families have been intimately exposed to violence. They cited the effects of alcohol abuse as the cause. So this is like domestic violence mostly. The annual cost of crime and antisocial behavior, this is normally where politicians actually sit up and listen instead of counting the taxes they get in from alcohol sales. Cost of crime and antisocial behavior from alcohol misuse is 7.3 billion annually. And more than 21,000 children are born annually in the UK to drinking mothers who have mental and physical deficiencies, or FASD as it's called, as a result of their exposure to alcohol in utero. So you might ask how it got this way. Relaxation, celebration. Ironically, a lot of the sort of permissiveness actually has a sort of scriptural, at least from the Bible, provenance. The Mass or the Eucharist, depending on what sort of Christian you are, actually involves alcohol. And the seriousness of alcohol problems seems to have been accelerated by distillation of liquor products, and research going back to as early as 1813 have actually established a connection between alcohol consumption, liver disease, jaundice, wasting, mental dysfunction. In Christian circles, opposition and also permissiveness have come depending on what denomination you're looking at. Actually, it's Methodist values that, backed by clinical research, that led to the American prohibition, going back to 1920 to 1933 in the States. But at the same time, in the Bible, the alcohol is seen as something which is good for those of heavy hearts, to let them drink and forget their poverty, remember their misery no more, which comes from Proverbs. So there is this sort of undertone of alcohol being sort of all right, and it's just like a few obnoxious individuals who make a problem out of it. But these days, especially at a time when we're at a turning point in things like legalization of recreational use of things like cannabis, vaping, return to public spaces, people spending lockdown with a cocktail in their hand, perhaps more than for the other blessings with studies, then the Westerners will find the Buddhist teachings go against the grain of accepted social norms. And although we might hide behind phrases like drinking responsibly, from the point of view of Buddhists, unless you're planning on drinking milk responsibly, there's no really such thing as drinking responsibly. So, what do the Buddhists say? We encountered abstinence from drinking alcohol at various stages in the blessings we have already studied. We've met them in the Roads to Ruin, Blessing 6, 7, 13, 14, as a fifth precept in Blessing 9. And also we have met it up with it as wrong livelihood in trading in Blessing 18. the Buddha devotes the entire blessing to it in this particular blessing, not because it's the damage it does just to your physical health, but also if you don't abstain from alcohol at this particular point in your sort of spiritual development, then it's very hard to see how you can upgrade yourself in the direction of blessing 21 on avoiding recklessness in the Dharma or any of the virtues more subtle than this. So if you consider self-discipline based on the 5 precepts, then you find that most of them are more or less independent from one another, except for the 5th one, because it sort of compromises your ability to use your conscience to the full. For the great abbot of Wat Pak Nam, the founder of our particular tradition, he compared the precepts, the 5 precepts, to an elephant with 4 feet and a trunk. 5 precepts, 4 legs and a trunk. And he said that the first 4 precepts, not killing, stealing, engaging in sexual misconduct or telling lies, would be equivalent to the 4 feet of an elephant, but the trunk would be equivalent to the 5th precept. And you might cut a leg off an elephant and it would probably still get by. But if you cut off its trunk, then it's pretty hard to see how it can survive at all. And it's much the same with the rest of the 5 precepts, which tend to go down in full if you miss the final one. So it is seen as the most crucial in the teachings of the Pramongkun Tepani, who is the founder of our Dhammakaya tradition. Alcohol seems pretty bad, but there's worse, and it comes in the form of drug addiction of various sorts. Because even if you try to help a person addicted to drugs with sympathy and sentimentality, a bleeding heart approach will almost certainly come back to bite you. And the first you know about it is when you start getting stolen from, for example, and later you will end up getting emotionally hurt, and you might lose your faith in humanity generally. There was someone in a PBS documentary once discussing heroin, and they said, the first time you shoot up, you may as well just go out there and rent yourself a removals van, so U-Haul in the United States. Bring it to your place, load it up with all your stuff, your house, your girlfriend, your friends, and everything. You might as well lose all that stuff up front, get it over with, because guaranteed you will eventually lose all that stuff, one way or another. You may think you won't, but no one gets out unscathed. It's just a matter of time. So it could be any Class A substance, or it might be any one of the sort of so-called gateway drugs that lead down that path. And friendship and sympathy, although that's our usual way to engage with people, it just doesn't help the situation. So, the trouble with alcohol is that it affects the mind. And we all know that the mind is pretty hard to train, even on the best of days. And if there's alcohol also in the mix, then all the usual habits of the mind, which we try really hard to control anyway, will really take root and be out of control. So being habituated to unwholesome thinking, for example, sometimes the mind has been compared to a fish out of water. Whenever it is deprived of sort of unwholesome habits, it will fight for its life to get back to them. And if alcohol is in the mix as well, then that struggle is all the more aggressive. The mind is pretty fickle at the best of times and tends to change continuously, but if it's under the influence of alcohol, then that changeability will be even more dramatic. Mind has a tendency to wander. We're trying to bring it back when we're meditating the whole of the time. It's pretty hard to keep the mind on one single thing, and that is even worse under the influence of alcohol. And it's pretty hard to pacify the mind, and it's just like throwing fuel on the fire if one is under the influence. So you might say, well, we don't drink, so we are never drunk. The Buddha went further to say that there's drunkenness even without drinking alcohol that we all suffer from anyway. And it's a sort of overconfidence concerning life, which makes us as good as drunk in many cases, especially concerning the everlasting nature of our youth. We tend to think, I can still go out every night, I'm still young, I'm still beautiful, I can still turn the heads of the youngsters. But really that is a form of drunkenness, according to the Buddha. We tend to think we'll always be disease-free, stay healthy forever, abusing our health doesn't really matter. And we tend to be unrealistic about the length of our lives, telling everyone or telling ourselves that the likes of us doesn't die so easily. So the Buddha called all such attitudes drunkenness. So even without drinking alcohol, people still think like this. So you can imagine how much worse it's going to get to see through to the truth of life if you are not fully aware. So some Buddhists say, well, the Buddha was really only talking about distilled alcohol. So what exactly is being talked about here in the case of intoxicants? Now, can you have wine gums? Can you have root beer? Can you have kombucha? What exactly does it refer to? The Buddha used the word majjapana to refer to anything that's absorbable by the body that clouds the mind. In general, it means alcohol, so that's either distilled or fermented, but it also refers to other substances like tobacco and addictive non-medicinal drugs. It can also mean liquids that are drunk or injected or inhaled, or dried substances that are smoked. The word sanyamo, which is the other part of the blessing in the Pali language, used in alcohol, literally speaking means being careful with regard to. And being careful of intoxicating substances doesn't just mean using these things with care. It means, in normal circumstances, it would mean total abstention. But unlike some religions where you're not even allowed to get a whiff of the stuff, in exceptional circumstances, alcohol is a component used for medical purposes. You heard of that? So Buddhism doesn't prohibit alcohol per se, but it might be used for cleaning a wound, preserving a corpse, or as a component of let's say, traditional medicines for indigestion. But the idea is to use it to cure a particular symptom, not to have more alcohol than medicine in the bottle. Yeah. So some people know that drugs like opiates are dangerous, but they may be useful for medicinal purposes. So the question generally is to go with prescription advice, and that would be called being careful with regard to. Yeah? Problems with alcohol. I've got some fun pictures from Prohibition era. Visible this lifetime, it will destroy your wealth, friendship, health, reputation, honor, and intelligence. So, do I need to explain more about that? Unfortunately, many of the things it does in this lifetime actually carry over into future lifetimes as well, if you want to read up on it. Speech impediments, you can imagine people speaking with slurred speech, people who behave in a crazy way, people who don't seem to be living up to their full intelligence, people who have to crawl home, or as they say, go by rail, go by the railings along the front of their house, go home by rail. Actually, next lifetime, instead of just being a passing phase that ends with a hangover, it ends up being your permanent state of being. So that is why the Buddha did not recommend it. And as a final cautionary tale, I will leave you with something called the Bad Regatta Jataka, Jataka number 291. You remember a rich merchant called Anathapindika, perhaps, if you heard some of my previous stories? One of the main supporters of the Buddha in those times. He had problems with a few of his relatives. Back in Blessing 12, we had the story about how he bribed his son to go to the temple. Maybe you can remember that? Well, he had a few other dysfunctional members of his own family. And as usual, he tried to help them with compassion as far as was possible. And he had another nephew who had squandered 40 million of the family's fortune on his drinking habits. And he has still ended up penniless. So the said nephew turned up uninvited at Anathapindika's house, asking for some financial help. Just the favorite sort of relatives who you hate to be visited by. So the nephew claimed that he would use the money that he was given to him to invest in business and to set himself up in life, turn his life around. So Anathapindika, in his usual characteristic compassionate style, was pleasantly surprised to hear his drunken nephew wanted to earn his living for a change. So, as a good example of the 3 strikes rule for helping extended family in Buddhism that we've already seen in Blessing 17, Anathapindika agreed to help his nephew out by giving him 1,000 and taught him a few tricks of the trade. So the nephew thanked him very much and wasted no time in going out and spending all the money on booze. And later, he came back again to Anathapindika and he said he'd lost all the money he'd been given in business due to a lack of experience and asked for money again. So, number 2, twice. So Anathapindika pretended he didn't know what was going on, but this time he gave the nephew only 500. The first time 1,000, second time 500, telling him to invest it wisely. So this is compassion for you at this stage. So the shameless nephew spent the 500 again on alcohol, and then went back a third time to Anathapindika asking for more money. And this time, instead of giving him money, Anathapindika gave him 2 pieces of cloth, knowing that the nephew at least would have to expend some effort in selling the stuff in order to get money out of it. And the nephew did sell the cloth, but again he spent all the money he earned from the sale on alcohol again. And he came back to Anathapindika for a 4th time with an outstretched palm. And this time Anathapindika had him thrown out on the street. So 3 times, 3 strikes, 4th time. And the nephew was now destitute and couch-surfed with everyone he could think of until he eventually died in poverty. And at that point, when Anathapindika heard the news, he felt a pang of shame, and he had himself to blame for his nephew's death. And he wondered, was there something more he could have done? So he went to see the Buddha, and he told the Buddha the whole story. And the Buddha said that it was not only in this lifetime that the nephew had been beyond help. And even in a previous lifetime, the nephew had been given a wish-fulfilling cup, so a sort of cup that you could wish for anything you like and it would appear in the cup. He'd had one of these things, and he'd still messed it up. He couldn't satiate his appetite for alcohol. So it was no surprise that even with Anathapindika's limited means, he couldn't help the person who was so addicted in this way. So even though Anathapindika's nephew had had the chance to help himself with free handouts from the millionaire, as a drunk, he didn't lift a finger to help himself. And for that reason, you could say he was beyond help. Therefore, before helping someone, sometimes it's necessary to see whether they're going to use the money you give them to buy alcohol. Sometimes the more you give them, the more it will destroy them. So this is why it's important to have a sense of being level-headed, or in Buddhism sometimes it's known by the sort of technical word of equanimity, to sort of see in a very balanced way where the best help, the best way forward to give help should be applied when helping others in society. So to finish off with a few little announcements. I encourage you to meditate further at home if you don't do already, and usually 20 minutes a day is a good place to start for those who are new to meditation, to try to build up a daily habit. Meditating in the morning, meditating in the evening, meditating at the time of day which is the time when you are least likely to be interrupted. And little by little then you will see progress. Sometimes you may have good days, sometimes you might have bad days, but on aggregate then generally you will see an improvement if you can manage to keep it up on a daily basis. If you get a little bit vague about how exactly to meditate, then these days they have a thing called Mind Gem that you can download onto your mobile phone, and it has lots of audio tracks, a constantly increasing number of audio tracks from various teachers in our tradition to lead you through your meditation, also with a timer to set to wake you up or whatever at the end, wake you from your meditation. Here in Woking we have class every Tuesday evening with the meditation a little bit shorter, 30 minutes worth, every Thursday 45 minutes worth of meditation, followed by a talk. And I'd like to say that coming up on the 23rd of October, we are hoping to organize our Katina Ceremony for this year. Anyone's interested in more details, they have a little brochure which is now in English. You have to make sure you get the one that's in English, because some I've got Thai on both sides, or English and Thai for everything else. Yes, so there's one that explains itself. But basically, if you'd like to participate, come along, attend. You can volunteer to help with the preparation, running and clearing up afterwards if you have some extra free time. And also you can donate for the Katina Ceremony, because this year we're hoping to construct 2 extra little annexes onto this building at the front area, filling it out a little bit at the front. One side will be as a reception area, and the other side will be for putting noisy children in. Yes. Online, we still have the remnant of the pandemic. We have the DMEU, or the European Meditation Together, between 7 and 8 every Saturday, with the English-speaking teachers around the continent chipping in each week. And next full moon meditation coming up in October, with the theme of the end of Buddhist Lent, will be on Tuesday the 11th of October, where there's a candle lighting activity along with the usual meditation and talk. So for today I will probably leave it there, and if you have any questions, comments or feedback, I'd be very pleased to hear from you at this point. You be blessed with happiness, success and prosperity in life, have full mindfulness, and be able to avoid the influence of any intoxicants that might otherwise cloud your perfect awareness on your pathway towards enlightenment.